Thank you, Carol Ann. My name is Anthony Wagner. I'm a doctoral student in the International Education program here at NYU. And as we heard this morning from Phil and some of the panelists, the unprecedented growth, what does that mean? By 2030, in just 6 years, the number of international students coming to the United States is projected to double to 2 million students, while the number of domestic students is projected to shrink by 15% in the United States. And this is happening, of course, at different levels in different countries around the world, in China and India, South Africa, Brazil, that are experiencing their own growth of international students and supporting those students and scholars. So this session is going to describe the reasons that are contributing to these enrollment changes and how these changes are leading to an increasingly diverse international student pool and what that means for higher education institutions and what we need to do to support those students and scholars who are coming to the United States. Becoming a global university has become vital to NYU's identity. We call ourselves a global network university, as well as other institutions that Joanne was talking about this morning that are also call themselves global universities. So we're going to discuss how colleges and universities can and should respond to this increase and the role that the next generation of internationalization practitioners will play in meeting these demands. And I just wanted to take a note before we dive into the panel, because it's interesting that although we have a projection of doubling the number of international students in the United States by 2030, that is happening at a time where I would guess that the number of members of NAFSA is also increasing at a similar rate. I know that the CIAS, the Comparative International Education Society, over the last decade has seen a double in its membership. So these are exciting increases in interest in international education. Yet it's also happening at a time of difficulties for higher education institutions in the United States that have programs like NYU Steinhardt's International Education Program. And so I hope that one of the things that we talk about in this panel as well is how do we support these programs that are training and building the next generation of these scholars to make sure that these programs last for a long time. So our panelists today are Sharif Barsoum, who is a Senior Associate Vice President of the Office of Global Services here at NYU. Elizabeth Lizzie Warden, who is Associate Professor of International Education at American University in Washington, D.C., and Renzong Tan, Director of the Center for Multicultural Education and Programs here at New York University. And we're going to start off just with our panelists describing their own roles of what you all do, your research interests, and also perhaps a bit about your journey to becoming folks working in and researching international education. So we'll start with Sharif.
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Sharif Barsoum from OGS, Office of Global Services here on campus. So I have been, I can't believe this, 10 years already at NYU. Time flies when you're having fun and you're busy, and we're definitely busy. Our office has about 42 advisors that help international students and also help international scholars. Also do the visas for all our students who go abroad to our different campuses and beyond. Before NYU, I was at Vanderbilt University for 8 years, being director at the international office there. And before that, 15 years at Ohio State University. I did my master's in higher ed in Ohio State and doctoral work, although I didn't finish the doctorate, but I did the doctoral work at University of Alabama. So I have been pleased to see the increase of international students here on campus since I've been here. It has doubled from about 10,000 to more than 20,000. So I think the idea of international education is something that is going to keep doubling, I hope, in the near future. And I'm looking forward to talking more about some of those ideas in a few minutes.
Thank you. I just want to say a word of thanks. I'm so excited to be here. To be back at Washington Square, I'll tell you in a minute. I'm an alum of the International Ed program here at NYU. I just want to thank Phil and Anthony and Dana and Carol Ann and all the grad students who put together this conference. It's really exciting and incredibly timely. I do want to talk later on in the conversation about what's happening in our own field with training graduate students. But just a little bit about me. I am a happy recipient of federally funded exchange programs. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the 1990s in Moldova and the former Soviet Union. And that was my first, apart from some study abroad in college, that was my first deep cross-cultural exchange experience. And it was challenging. It was not the toughest job I ever loved, which Peace Corps likes to bill itself. I did not love it, but it forever shaped my life. And there's probably not a day that goes by still, almost 30 years later, that I don't think about Moldova. And after Moldova, I landed in New York, was not working at all related in the field of international ed, but realized what I wanted to do, again, from my experience in Moldova, is think about education as a vehicle for transformation, and found the program at NYU, started my master's, stayed for my PhD, and my dissertation research, and later my research for the past 20 years, is based on questions that I asked as a Peace Corps volunteer. How do you learn to be a citizen in a new political system? How do you go from communism to a democratic system? How do you teach history? How do you learn about your past? Those are still the questions that I ask today. And so I just throw that out there for all the master students and doctoral students, that I encourage you to think about the questions that you ask in your own life, what gets you up out of bed in the morning, and how those can translate into questions that you might ask for your entire career. I'm also very much interested in internationalization, exchange. I teach a class at American University on exchange. I was a Fulbright scholar. I was also a Title VIII recipient. Both are exchange programs. We heard about Fulbright in the last panel. So I've been at American University since 2007. I'm an associate professor there. And for the past 2 years, I also served as the director of our international ed program. And I stepped down from that in September. And I think that's everything.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Renjong Tan. I go by she, they pronouns. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm glad to talk a little bit about my personal journey. I think individual experience is so important when we talk about the field that we are in, how we come to this field, and where our passion comes from. So currently, I serve as the director of CMAP. As Anthony introduced, CMAP is the Center for Multicultural Education and Programs. And before coming here, I came here 2022 in the fall. Before coming here, I was at NYU Shanghai. I worked there for more than 7 years. So I've had the fortune of working at 2 different NYU Portal campuses. And I haven't been to NYU Abu Dhabi, but I often come to NYU AD House. So I hope to go to Abu Dhabi sometime and have the opportunity to experience what's it like there. Before NYU Shanghai, I was a grad student at NYU. I graduated in 2014. And so that 2 years of experience in New York really opened my mind and eyes to a lot of different cultures, people's ideas. And after graduation, I think a couple of months after graduation, in the next year following my graduation, I started working at NYU Shanghai, and specifically on new student programs and orientation. So what we did is to do a variety of welcome programs, first-year experience program, to really help our students get familiar and adjusted to not only the campus life in at NYU Shanghai, but also the city of Shanghai, and help them explore the resources and the wonderful opportunities in the city. And so after 2 years of working in that position, my former colleague working on diversity initiatives had to leave for coming back to the US to pursue her master's degree. And so I was back then already kind of immersed in the diversity initiatives related programs and events that she was organizing. And I really developed a keen interest to learn a little bit more because I feel those events were helping me to develop a more critical lens to my personal experiences and a lot of social issues that I was witnessing as well. And so they were looking for a replacement for that former colleague, and they realized that I can be their replacement. And so I stepped into that role and worked in that role for more than 5 years or so. And when this opportunity in New York came up, I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to come back to New York in a different capacity and work on a different scale, different platform with a different student population. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much. And what an interesting group of perspectives we have. We have offices that support students from way before they arrive at the university and while they're here, and even sometimes when after they have left. We have an office that supports leadership and programs while students are here. And then we have the experiences of students in the classroom and also the training of professionals who are working with international students and domestic students. I'd like to start. We talk about enormous growth in the international student population. I think sometimes we don't understand what that means. And so I hope that just to start us off, we could talk, looking to 2030 and this figure of 2 million students, what are some of the reasons for the increase in international student enrollment in U.S. higher education? And is this something that's new, or is this part of a trend that we've been experiencing longer than just the last few years? And we don't necessarily have to go in the same order, but I'll open it up to our panelists.
So I'm gonna share with you something. Let's see. I have to read this because there's so much information. But so the top senders of international students with the largest increase this past year, these are countries that you will be very surprised, because when I read them, I was like, wow, this is not what we're used to. This is not what's on our campus right now. So here we are, Bangladesh, plus 26% this past year. Colombia, plus 11%. Ghana, plus 45%. India, plus 23%. Iran, this surprised me, plus 15%. Even with all the rhetoric that we're hearing, it's plus 15%. Nepal, plus 11%. Nigeria, plus 14%. And I think if we had easier visa allowance for Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Cameroon, a lot of the African countries, we would have a lot more African students here on this campus. And then finally, Pakistan, 8% increase. So all of those are very surprising to me because our top countries are right here on campus and in the United States in general are China, of course, and then India, Korea, Canada, okay, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. So all of those are different than what we have here. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a very incredible demographic shift. We already have started seeing it. India has just surpassed China for the first time since 2009 to be the most international students here in the United States, and by far. So again, China, India, and Korea have probably half the population. States like California, New York, Texas have about 50% of the international student population. So we're talking about, 45 other states in the United States that can increase the international population with ease. There's probably only about 100 or so universities that have over 1,000 people, 1,000 international students enrolled. But we have 4,000 universities in the United States. Our capacity is incredible. It's great. If you compare us with Australia, Canada, England, we have many more universities, and we have the capacity to host international students a lot more and do the research a lot more than other areas in the world. So I do believe that the idea of doubling is hard. I know that the IIE is very ambitious, and we're all wanting to double, but some of the projections are 7% more, 10% more, 15% more. I'll be happy with any of those, and and but I think that the demographics are going to be changing. I think they're already changing, and where we are thinking about, oh, we're always going to rely on China and India, that's not going to happen in the future. I think in the next, in 10, 20 years, the actual demographics I've seen that are countries that have a rising population of 10 to 14-year-olds that are very soon going to be college age are all in Africa, okay? Many in Southeast Asia or so, but definitely Africa is on the rise.
Well, and so thinking about these, the changes that you're seeing, Sharif, here at NYU, I assume that these are changes that colleagues that you talk to are experiencing as in other institutions as well. What are some of the motivations for this increase? Is it just that more people want to study? Are there more students trying to go to college or interested in going to college? Or, is it because the United States is being particularly attractive to students? Well, what have you seen any difference in your careers or in working with students or in teaching students that would signify that maybe institutions need to change what they're doing to support those students as well? I'll open up to all of the panelists.
I'm ready to answer this question. I've thought a lot about this. And this is anecdotal research. Like, I couldn't write a dissertation on this, please no. This is what I've observed at my institution at American University and talking to colleagues. There seems to be a retrenchment of internationalization, right? When I arrived at AU in 2007, one of our strategic goals was to bring the world to AU and AU to the world. I remember writing that in my tenure file. I just filed my my file for full professor. I didn't even bring it up. It's no longer a strategic goal. And it seems to me, and I have talked to other colleagues about this, in the past 4 years especially, we've seen this retrenchment and this move away from internationalization. And I think we're a little bit out of practice at this point. I think we need to expand our advocacy, and I'm borrowing some of the language from the first panel that I really appreciated, talking, I think it was Claire who talked about developing a better sales pitch, right? Developing our fluency, because it is our common sense in this room, the air that we breathe, that international education is a good and a positive thing, right? And it's the common sense of university administrators. It's not the common sense of all faculty, right? Many faculty, they're not focused on this. They are not focused on the benefits of international education. We know from experiences the faculty have had at AU, this has been talked about, we've done workshops on it, international students are often seen as a burden in their classrooms. They don't understand the language, the specific technical language for some of the science classes. They don't understand, some of the analytical skills that maybe some of the high school students got in North America before coming to AU. And so I think in preparation for the influx of more international students, which I'm excited for, by the way, I think we need a real attitudinal shift. And I think we need advocacy with just everyday faculty, like not the faculty in the School for International Service at AU, faculty in like, the English department, art history, and biology, and communications. I don't think that's a hard sell, but I think we've not focused on that. And I think because there's been a macro trend away from internationalization, the focus, I think of like faculty workshops now. Faculty workshops are all on, I'll talk about this in a little bit in thinking about citizenship, on how do we bridge the political divide in our classroom, right? We no longer have faculty workshops on like, how do you develop a study abroad program, right? So I think we're out of practice at the macro level, and I think that's trickled down to the faculty level in everyday classroom. So I think we need to step it up a little bit, think about internally how we can revive internationalization.
And this is really the right time to do so, especially when we look at some of our competitors, England, Australia, both passed, laws that limit and have a cap on international students studying in those countries. Australia, right now doesn't know what's going on, if they're going to do it or not going to do it. They keep going back and forth, but definitely Canada and the UK have both set a cap. This is a great opportunity for the United States. This is a great opportunity for our 4,000 institutions of higher education to have more of presence in the world. I can tell you that a few months ago, I was at IIE, and Anna's here from Germany, and DAAD was here talking about, how do we get more American students to go and study in Germany? And you know this very well because some of your kids study in Germany. So it's something that other countries are talking about. India, China. China is going into Africa and getting a lot of African students to go and study in China. And so this is the right time and the right space for us to, as a country, to explore how can we support increased international education? How can we support scholarships that bring people here? How do we support our own American students going abroad? Because those are wonderful ambassadors for international education.
Yeah, if I can follow up on what Elizabeth you just shared, I think it's so important to take a strength-based and asset-based approach when it comes to supporting our international students. A lot of times we talk about, what we need to provide to the international students, what we need to equip them with. But what about, you mentioned in the classroom experience, what kind of skills and knowledge we need to equip with faculty members and as well as domestic students who are interacting with international students on a daily basis. My colleagues within the Office of Global Inclusion, they do a semesterly seminar for faculty members. It's called Inclusive Teaching Seminar. And so in that seminar, they discuss with faculty about, strategies, tips to really navigate the classroom and teach materials in a way that's equitable and culturally affirming and inclusive. And so when it comes to designing what kind of activity that feels inclusive to students with different learning styles, how do you assign different assignments and mark them and not assume their learning style or communication style is inferior to the American style. And so those are some of the mindset and cultural shift that you talked about that I think also needs to happen for sure.
Thank you. And Sharif, in conversations with you, I hear about the networking that you do and the conversations and colleagues you have with other folks in NAFSA and across the country. A reminder that all institutions, even a global network university, need to have a little bit of institutional humility when it comes to learning and to thinking through the next steps. I work with rural community colleges in Maryland that have global citizenship in their mission statement now and have international students, and this is literally throughout all 4,000 of the higher education institutions. So moving into that, and I know, Lizzie, that you're a grad of NYU, but you're now at AU. What specifically is NYU doing to prepare for these shifts? And on top of that, what are we learning from other institutions as well to prepare for what's to come? Whether it's is a 7% increase or whether it's the full double, right, by 2030?
I think our enrollment management folks are doing an amazing job to diversify the pipelines that are coming into the U.S. For NYU. I think our departments are. I mean, one of the major things that is great about NYU is that our professors are partnering up with other professors around the globe, and that really stirs the international education field to have more people come in. So if somebody has a research partnership with another institution abroad, or two professors that are working on something, then some of those students would come in here, some of our students would go there for exchange. I think enrollment management is definitely in every university is a key player and a key factor. NYU doesn't use too many agents, but the agents field is growing incredibly across the country, and many institutions do use agents to recruit international students from various parts of the world. I think they even have a conference, the ARC conference, that happens every year for all the agents. But I think along with recruiting, there has to be some other kind of incentives, which, for example, a good support system here at the university, financial aid, scholarships, graduate assistantships, all kinds of, those are all factors to bringing in the best and the brightest and keeping the best and the brightest here in the United States.
Actually, how many of you are NYU actually? Okay. And how many of you have heard of the Center for Multicultural Education Programs? Oh, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. I guess for those of you who are less familiar, I want to answer this question by sharing a little bit more about CMAP first. And so CMAP has existed for 35 years. And I think the approach in terms of how we support international students, among other students from all kinds of backgrounds, can be illustrated through the journey of CMAP in terms of different iterations of its name. So CMAP was established in 1988, and the office was back then named the Office for African American Student Services. And then a couple of years later, it changed to Office for African American and Latino Student Services. And then a couple of years later, it changed to Office for African American, Latino Students, and American Student Services. And it was in 2006 that CMAP has changed to CMAP, which is for Multicultural Education Programs. So it was no longer serving a handful of identity groups, but really a diverse student communities. Of course, would still have that center and focus on students of color, communities from historically marginalized backgrounds, but we're taking an approach that's much more multicultural. Maybe some of you think it's a relatively outdated term, but a multicultural, multiracial, and more diverse and really global perspective. And so in 2018, the Office of Global Inclusion was established, and CMAP became part of Office of Global Inclusion. And by the name Global Inclusion, I think that's something that we try to emphasize a lot as well. So inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity, and access work, we think, that global perspective is so inherent to it. And so while unlike OGS, we don't have a focus on international student. We do want to, keep in mind how we are doing our work in a non-US centric way, in a global way. And that's, I think, built in a lot of the work that we do. And so while offices like OGS work to, for example, support with mobility, visa, cultural adjustment, transition services, I think what we do at CMAP is really complement those efforts by providing culturally affirming and inclusive spaces. And I think one thing that's important to the work that we do that applies to, both American students and international students is this perspective of how the role of education, the purpose of education is partly to teach an individual to be critical, critically examining the society that they're in. And so I think the programs and leadership development and services that we provide, definitely, we're hoping to help students develop a critical consciousness, look at issues around privileges, oppression, marginalization in a certain lens so that they can recognize their privileges. They can look at issues related to inequalities and inequities and develop that awareness both at individual level and collective level. And I think that's hugely, hugely beneficial to the international students as well. I think they're here in the United States, not just for academic achievement enhancement, not only for kind of the cultural exchange, but also that critical lens. They look at issues that are important in the American cultural and political sphere, and they can develop a comparative perspective when they go back to their home country. How does those issues compare? And I think they develop a better awareness of their own positionality as well. So I think what we do is developing that critical lens that I think is really important. And I think one thing that I also want to emphasize is this concept of international students and how we think about them and label them and sometimes stereotype them because of the way that we talk about them. I was listening to a podcast about how there can be a shift from talking about them as international students to talking about them as internationalized students. So not focusing on their personal characteristics, what they're good at, what they're lacking of, but rather the process and the environment and the structure in that makes them have that internationalized identity and experience. At CMAP, we talked about how students' experience are gendered, racialized, or classed, and I think the same can be applied to international students as well. And so DEI efforts, a lot of times when we talk about them or hear about them, is separate from initiatives and strategies to support international students. But I think these two should definitely be complementary and weaved into one another.
That's really lovely. Paulo Ferri is smiling down on us for what you said about critical consciousness. Lizzie, I think that's interesting because it relates, your research has looked at citizenship education and the creation of student identities. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit about the role that universities play in shaping those identities, and also what we need to know about people coming from places where, even within the United States, right, where this idea of citizenship is different. And so when they participate in these programs, there is such diversity, even in understanding what it means to be a citizen.
So full disclosure, Anthony did give us these questions in advance. I didn't answer all of them completely because it's nice to have some spontaneity. This was a really hard question. I thought about this a lot. I really appreciate it. The idea of higher ed in the construction of citizenship and identities in 2024. And I so appreciate your comments on critical consciousness and expanding DEI initiatives to include international students. And that's along the lines about what I was thinking of, is that I think we need to move away from our traditional conceptions of citizenship, that is someone with, loyalty and belonging to a state, boundaries. I also want us to kind of maybe push or move away from global citizenship, which is a term I've never loved because it's so nebulous and I've never been able to define it. And why is it that an NYU student who can spend every semester studying abroad is a global citizen, but someone who lives in Kenya who can't get a visa to leave his or her country, but speaks 3 languages and is connected to everyone on social media, maybe can't have that title? And so those are just my own questions that I've asked in my own, academic work in my own life. And so moving away from those, and I was really thinking about this. I really appreciated this question. And so I was thinking about, well, maybe then if we're moving away from these traditional conceptions of citizenship, maybe higher ed becomes this space for I don't even say democratic, for dispositions and for skills that are needed in today's increasingly polarized world. And I was thinking about this about 7 or 8 years ago. Sharif and I were on a panel or a seminar sponsored by NASA on education, higher education and peace building. And I thought, well, what do we think about that? It's like maybe it's no longer peace building, but maybe it's that higher education can maintain this space for dialogue, for tolerance, for the exploration of thought and ideas. Like maintain this space and almost countering or attempting to counter polarization, authoritarianism. But international students have to be equal thought partners in this space, right? That's the key. And I think it's moving away from these sort of separate spheres that we've had in higher ed, where we have the DEI initiatives, and then we have the international students and scholar services workshops and initiatives. And so I don't have the answer to that of how we bring everyone into the fold, and especially faculty, of having international students be equal thought partners in developing this dialogue and helping students navigate difference. And I think it's also important for faculty at U.S. institutions of higher ed to move beyond our own interior gaze, right? I just think so much right now. We've had so many workshops truly in the past 4 years since George Floyd, since COVID, on how we navigate difference in the classroom, how we talk to students across the political divide. But I think it's now time to broaden that aperture. And again, I can only think of it as bring international students in as like equal thought partners in this endeavor. And let me look at my notes here because I was very excited about this question. And I think that's it. So as we think about welcoming more international students, I think it's on us to think how we can create these spaces that are aligned with some of the same goals of citizenship, of developing dispositions and skills, but it's just moving into a new space and maintaining that space.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that totally answers it. On this notion of change and how NYU and other institutions are making changes or building out what they already do. Sharif, you mentioned in your introduction that the number of international students here at NYU has doubled in the last 10 years. And now well over 20,000 international students come to NYU. So I think it would be interesting. We have a lot of folks out here who are students in international education who hope to one day, we talk about finding the way forward. The way forward's out here, right? Or it's before us. So what has changed in your office in those last 10 years? What does it look like to get under the hood and see what is going on?
So I give vitamins to all my staff because it's incredible, an incredible change. Let me start by saying, we can't think of an international office like OJS as just a place where you do visas or where you have paperwork and that's it, because we have a lot more to offer. One of the things that we've started with cooperation with many offices around campus, Center for Student Life and Student Affairs, Career Services, the Health Center, others, is something what we call affectionately iHub, which is called International Student Hub. That's pretty much our programming arm for the international students on campus. We want to make sure that when you come to the United States, you try to get your degree, but you're successful and you're supported, and you are learning a little bit about the United States. So this programming part is a great way to learn about the U.S., to have U.S. students learn about your country and origins and way of life. So we started this international hub programming arm. And last year, I'm proud to say that we did 406 programs in 1 year. That's over one program every day. So, and those programs are anything from, how do I get my CPT or OPT or work permission? How do I apply for things? How do I apply for a Social Security card? How do, what to dress in the wintertime here in New York City when it's freezing? two other programs on how to write a resume, coaching, how to interview American style, things like that. And our career services partners with us all the time, and they're very, very proficient in that. The other things that we do is just taking them out to different things in New York City, Broadway shows, but not just going to a Broadway show, actually having a brunch before the Broadway show where we talk with each other about things. We have this really other wonderful program called Table Talk, which I know a lot of different places have, but we take 20 or so students to a restaurant, and we pick a different restaurant, Korean or Japanese or whatever it is, and we go and have a meal together, and they experience all these international food that's delicious here in New York City, but also ask the chef to come out and talk to us about the food that we're eating and the culture behind the food. So that's been really wonderful. I'll tell you, one of the most popular programs that we ever do is taking 3 or 4 buses out to Woodbury Commons so they can go shopping. So that's a great way also to see an American tradition is shopping. So lots of those kinds of things happen around town, and our work is not only just doing paperwork and visas and reporting about international students to the government, because we are required to do that. It is also making sure that they are, healthy, safe, and thrive. Thriving is a big thing with our new president, of course, Linda Mills, and making sure that people are giving the chance to thrive. One other thing that we have started in the past 5 years or so is we thought it would be great if some of our students would meet American students in a meaningful way doing service learning programs, not only here on campus, but also abroad. So we started alternative spring break programs where we go to Cape Town, South Africa, we go to Costa Rica, we go to Panama, we go to Morocco. This year we're going to go to India for the first time. But those are great ways for American students and international students to live together, serve together for 10 days or so. And I tell you, they make lifelong friendships and understand each other much more once you've spent so much time with each other. So, educating the whole person and making sure that people are using their skills in the United States. But I think a lot of times, like you're saying, we put the onus on the international students. I like to put that a little bit more on the American students, And I always say that in the orientation, when we do orientations, American students, when they first come to NYU, they're just as scared as you are. They are just as scared as the international students, because they haven't been to NYU before, and they may come from a very small town where they have never seen a big building before. They have never seen somebody that looks like you before. So we're all in this together. They might be a little shy, so you make the first move. Sometimes, there's a little push where you say hello first. Hi, I'm from Korea. And then you get a deluge of questions from the Americans about where you're from, what you eat, what you do. So leveling up the playing field is definitely, I agree with Lizzie about that one.
Thanks, Sharif. I just have to say, I once helped to coordinate a summer program for international students, and we were going to go to DC, they were going to go to the White House, the Congress, to Philadelphia. The only non-negotiable thing that we could not remove from the schedule was a trip to the Leesburg outlets for shopping. So that was interesting. Retail and international exchange. So talking about, going back to what happens in the classroom, about how we have new programs, these offices have evolved and grown over the last couple of decades. What can you reflect on what you kind of perceive as being the really key skills and competencies that people in these offices, faculty in the classrooms, administrators making decisions and allocating resources, what do we need to understand, or what do future practitioners and faculty members need to understand, and how can programs better train these folks as we move forward?
Yeah, I think the kind of cultural curiosity and open-mindedness and humility is so important. I think a lot of us know to not think about I guess it's not so much about cultural sensitivity because it implies that you're afraid of being offensive, but it's really about being humble, that there's something that you can learn from people from different backgrounds and being curious. So I think what Sharif also talked about, having the onus more on American students as well. I think like cultural humility and open-mindedness is something that everyone should develop and can benefit from. So for practitioners and professionals, I think that keen curiosity to learn the individual background of each student is so important. And going off of what Lizzie just shared as well, in terms of, I lost my train of thought there. But it's definitely about cultural humility and being open-mindedness. But also, I think not assuming a US-centric mindset, as I talked about before. I think being here, it's a lot of times what we consume in terms of information and media is dominated by American news, and that's understandable. But what's happening in other worlds, and how can we draw connections between what's happening here and what's happening globally? And so, for example, one way that I think we're starting to do and being mindful about, but also want to do more in the future, is how we can be more, taking a more global perspective when we talk about issues related to gender and race. And I'll give a few very small examples. So even the language that we use, students of color, a lot of students, international students, when they first come here, we host, students of color welcome for them. And we've had a couple of students, I think by their, look, they're East Asian, female presenting, and they came to our lounge and asked, oh, can I come to this event? Like, am I part of students of color? And so this kind of language and vocabulary is not something they're exposed to. And I think instead of assuming that, oh, you are, unequipped, you are underdeveloped, or you are ignorant about those concepts and issues, I think we should think about how we shift and change the way that we brand things, that we name things, that we talk about things, so that we're not excluding them or alien them at the first place. And same as students of color, I think BIPOC is another acronym that sometimes we use. And there are controversies around its use, when we talk about Black, Indigenous people of color. I've had a friend who asked me, oh, why is it Black, Indigenous people of color, as if you're not Black or Indigenous, then you are categorized as other people of color? Like, why is that divide among students of color? And sometimes because, as you said, America is so polarized and divisive in a lot of issues, tensions are high, people are afraid of having these kind of conversations. So instead of talking about those linguistic and ideological and conceptual nuances in the way that we name things, we go with it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities in really unpacking the concepts and notions and the naming. And when it comes to gender-related things, yesterday I participated a launch reception of a series of gender pronouns and inclusive practices video series that my colleagues at the NYU LGBTQ+ Center hosted. And so it was a 4-year project where they created a series of videos that really is trying to educate everyone how to use gender pronouns, what they are, and how we can be inclusive in our language in general, both in classroom and outside. And I think it's wonderful resources for any students, for any faculty members, even at family dinner tables, we can use those prompts to discuss gender-related issues and cultures and expectations. And I was thinking, as I was filling out the feedback form, how great it would be for us to use those as prompt to talk about gender pronouns in different cultural and linguistic contexts, right? So like, I know in a lot of languages, we don't have, by pronunciation, that differentiation in terms of the female pronouns and the male pronoun or other pronoun. And so like, how does that change how we think about gender, for example? So I think bringing those race, gender, class, disability, religion, faith, related conversation in that, within that broader global context is a huge opportunity there.
I also want to go back to, how the office has changed. 10 years ago, international students were a bit more patient. Now it's not as much, and with the age of, X and whatever else, social media that we use, text messages, things like that, we try to be a bit, on the forefront to make sure that, first of all, our website is really informative and very up to date. We try to make sure that they are informed by emails and other things. But also we instituted something last year that was just, we're trying it out to see how it will go, because hopefully it will help with answering some of the basic questions. We instituted a chat bot in our emails and in our website. And in 4 months, 3,000 hits, 3,000 people actually went in and asked a question on the chatbot. So it's directly connected to our website, so it just pulls everything out of our website, so everything is correct. So we're going to keep using technology. We're going to keep using whatever we have to do so. But we also started something it's called Campus Community, and where we have our students connect with each other online before they even get here. And so we wanted to make sure that we're building that community, even if it's not face-to-face, at least it's online. Once they get to campus, then they are hopefully getting a face-to-face experience. But technology doesn't exclude the face-to-face part and the personal part. But we want to use as much technology as possible to make sure that they are successful in everything that we do.
I don't have so much to add, and I'm really stuck on the idea of what skills, right? Like what hard skills do faculty need? And I'm still going to think about that. We can talk about it at lunch. But one thing that's really hard, sort of like the elephant in the room, that I'm trying to think how we can get around is how can we have an attitude shift from faculty of thinking of international students as just revenue generators, right? Of international students are going to save the university. That's going to be our silver bullet. That's how we're going to make up for the declining enrollments. Like, that doesn't, maybe that's true, right? Maybe that's going to help. Maybe it'll be our silver bullet. But that doesn't make international students feel very good. Doesn't make faculty feel very good. How do we have real relationships with students if we see them as like the silver bullet of saving our enrollment crisis, right? So I want to shift that. I would like to see that shift. And I don't have an answer yet, but I think it does relate to these ideas around humility, around openness, around, I remember many years ago when there was a movement among faculty to think about how we could serve first-gen students better, right? So could we have that movement for international students, reviving our ideas around internationalization, reviving that enthusiasm and that excitement, and coming with it with sort of a fresh approach of these international students can contribute so much and be such an important part of our community, and embrace that and move forward. So I don't have like a clear answer. I don't have the exact skills that we need, but this is what I'm thinking about.
And there probably aren't silver bullets, right, for that either. That it depends on the institution, it depends on the faculty member, and it depends on the department. So one more question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. And if you're joining us on Zoom, please go ahead and start typing in the chat, and we'll make sure that your questions get asked as well. I'm going to try to combine two questions here. So we heard a lot in the first panel about the uncertainty of moving forward. We know that there's going to be growth, but because of election results, because of all kinds of things, enrollment declines that we hear about as well in US higher education, that there is a lot of uncertainty. But this idea that the mission of international education should create mutual understanding, that it should have a public purpose, not dollars and cents of being a silver bullet to solve these problems in that way. How do we really hold on to that and make sure that that is front and center in everything that we do to recruit international students, to ensure that they succeed, that they are part of the community, that we kind of critically analyze how we talk about and support international students as well, that we really make sure that that is the central tenet of what we're doing here? And that's a big question, maybe an unfair question for us to end on, but I think it's really important.
I think that question is a very American question, which is good. I mean, we're in America. But I see that our international students also think about the return on investment, the ROI. What's the return? If I come to the United States, why? Why, if I can just get a free education in England or in Europe, why would I come to the United States? So the return on investment is I think is kind of in the top of their mind, their parents' mind, others, because when you get a U.S. degree, you really are marketable anywhere in the world, and so that's what we have to do. And a lot of them will tell me, when I meet with them, look, my parents put up thousands of dollars. I have to get internship. I have to get OPT, work permission, maybe an H-1 afterwards, and work in the United States so I can pay back some of the money that I've spent, on my education. And it's up to us in the United States to kind of facilitate some of that. We need to work with industry more. Meanwhile, doing all the American things that we want to do, which is having a global society, having people understand what we do here in the United States, peace build, doing all that other stuff that we should be doing anyways along the way, and by part of everything that an American education is, but building bridges with different companies and other things, careers, is very important. And so I would say that's what I would caution us to think about, the return on investment for those international students.
I just have something quick to add. I like how you're thinking about holistically, right, of, businesses and industry. And I was just going to add, it needs to be bottom up and top down. So it needs to come from the provost and all the associate vice provosts and global studies offices, but also from faculty and students and everyone in between.
I think underlying everything that has been talked about, how it can contribute to mutual understanding, civic engagement, peace building, bridge building. I think the foundation of everything is relationship building. And I think that return on investment is not only in a career term or monetary term, but also on a relationship term. So who are the friends that you were able to make, and what kind of perspectives did they expose you to, and how can you leverage those lifelong, hopefully, friendships and connections to cultivate your personal growth and cultivate and nourish your mutual growth. And so I think whether it's faculty or student affairs practitioners, we can do a lot to facilitate that relationship building. And I really think that aspect is at the core of everything that we do at CMAP as well. So I think this is related to both the skills that I think we should develop, but also how we not lose sight of things at the micro level while we look at the macro level in terms of trends and data, how we really facilitate an environment where they are really tender and caring to one another and engage in a very compassionate way and know how to navigate each other's differences. I think that's really the foundation of everything.